Welcome back to the Meeple Marathon, everyone, and our continued coverage of Anachrony, the Essential Edition, plus the Fractures of Time expansion. In this video, we are going to be discussing how to set up for both a standard game and the solo player components, and then how to play the game. And then in the next video, we will do a full playthrough against the Chronobot. Now, there are two actual solo AIs found in the Fractures of Time expansion. The Chronobot here is essentially the basic AI and is only meant to play using the standard Anachrony stuff, none of the expansions or variants or anything like that. But the Chronosaurus can handle all the variants. Now, it's got a lot more moving parts, and so that's going to be a whole nother separate video. So today, everything you see here is from the base box, is from Anachrony Essential Edition, except for the Chronobot stuff. Now, you can go out and find the original Chronobot. This one's been upgraded a little bit. It's, it actually is tougher at the end of the day. They have updated some things, but essentially the brains of the thing can be found in the original Chronobot, which is free for print and play on Mindclash's website. So if you can only find Essential Edition, you could still play pretty much what I'm about to play by simply printing off the components for free. And then you don't even have to pay for the Fractures in Time expansion. So with all that being said, let's get on with how to set up the game, because obviously you got to have it set up on the table, and this is a table hog. You can see I am utilizing my camera's ultra wide mode to get everything in the shot. So you guys will have to let me know whether you prefer to see everything out in front of you all at once, or whether you prefer me to pick certain areas to focus on. I personally like the overhead all-inclusive shot, so that's what we're really showing for today. All right. So for setup, let's start with the main board. And the main board is actually very simple to set up at the beginning. You just lay it out. You want to make sure if you're playing multiplayer, you have it on the correct side. So this is the 2 to 3 player side. So we are essentially playing a 2-player game against me and the solo AI. There is a 4-player side. It just has one additional worker placement spot in each area. Then you want to take this board here, this overlay tile, which has the meteorite strike on the other side, impact, but for now it just sits there and looks pretty. It's for decoration. And then the last thing you want to do is set out your 2 dice. Technically this just goes anywhere. I just like to put it there because it keeps all the dice together and I know where to find it. But these 2 dice are supposed to go here, and then this one, again, I just stuck there. The last thing you can go ahead and do is go ahead and place out these 3 matching colors of resource cubes. They will always be filled at the beginning of every round, so you can go ahead and place them there. The rest of these are going to be filled at the beginning of every round, along with your workers are going to be filled at the beginning of every round. And that's it. That's all you need to do for the main board. Now, when you're playing solo, the solo player always gets to start as first player. So you can go ahead and put their flag out. You can keep your flag off to the side if you want, put it anywhere you want, but more often than not, the solo AI continues to keep first player, so you don't even need to get it out of the box if you really don't want to. But that's it for the main board. That is the main worker placement spot where everybody is going and fighting over the same spots. All right. Next thing we're going to look at is the timeline. So this represents the eras in which you are building up your faction in order to be in the best position to take over when the impact strikes. So this tile here represents when the impact is going to strike. We actually happen to know, because we have mastered time travel, we happen to know when the meteor is going to strike. And the meteor striking is what put the resources, the purple resource, the ultratanium or whatever it is, into the world, which then they use to send stuff back to us, and then we discovered, hey, they're sending stuff back to us, and so on and so forth. So we know when the meteor is going to strike. Each one of these arrows here represents an era in which we are attempting to get stuff done leading up to the meteor strike, and then the meteor strike actually speeds up the end game process. So these first 4 rounds are going to go kind of slow. We're going to be able to take our time and make decisions. Here, the game could end very quickly. It may not make it all the way to here. I have seen it end right here. So this timeline is very critical. Now, what do we do with this timeline? I'll explain in the how to play setup. But for now, you can play with the variable sides of these arrows, where there's actually different tokens here. I mean, different benefits from placing your tokens down. But that's like a game variant that just adds complexity to the game. So for right now, we're just playing where they all look the same, so it doesn't matter. You just put 1, 2, 3, 4, impact tile, 1, 2, 3. Then above them, you're going to take all of these super projects and shuffle them up and just place one above each of the tiles here, and technically you can go ahead and flip over the very first one. So this will give you an idea of what a super project looks like. It's got some victory points. It's got a name. The name makes it easy to look up in the back of the rule book in the appendix. This gives you the benefit of this tile. In this instance, you have a one-time effect of removing 3 of your warp tiles from the timeline. Again, we'll explain all that later. But then over here you have the cost of resources, and you have the cost of research tiles, breakthroughs they're called, that you have to give up as well. So you can't, it's going to take you a little while to accumulate the resources needed to pay off these, especially the breakthroughs. In this instance, you're either going to need the circular breakthrough with the clock symbol on it, or you can have any triangle and any square breakthrough. So let me just show you an example. I have these off to the side. Here is an example of what the breakthroughs look like. They're just tokens, cardboard tokens, but they are in specific shapes. And you can see that I just happen to grab out 2 that have the same symbol on them, but there is ones in there, triangle, circle, and square, that each have that clock symbol on them. And so, like I said, we'll talk more about this later, but as you do research, you will be gaining these in somewhat random fashion. So anytime you see what looks like a black hole underneath the pictured resource, that means you have to give it up. Put it back to the supply, essentially. You have to lose it. You don't get to keep it anymore. You don't just have to prove that you have it. You actually have to lose it in order to gain that thing. So these 2 tokens here are representative of where we are in the timeline, what era we are in. So these are each era represents a round. So you can see we'll have 4 rounds, impact, and then up to 7. But like I said, it could end in 5, 6, or 7. This token here is going to move along, one for me and one for the solo AI. Is going to move along here. Technically, you don't need one for the solo AI, but this helps keep me track of what round I'm in case I time travel. Because if I do time travel, I may go backwards like this, 2 eras, and be over here, and then I don't want to. I will have already done 4. I will be in the 4th round. Should be moving on to this 5th. I don't want to be. Oh, I'm moving on to the 3rd round. So put one of your faction markers at the bottom. If you're playing multiplayer, you would all just line yours up under the 1st era. All right. So moving down the board, let's focus over here for right now on what in a regular game or any multiplayer game, this is what you would focus on. You're going to want to take your player board here. Now there is an A side and a B side. All of the A sides are, the artwork's different, but otherwise everything's exactly the same. The payment of everything, the cost of mechs and everything, all of it's the same. However, if you want to play with some variability, you flip it over to the B side, which is what we're playing with today. So this is the Path of Salvation's B side. You'll notice a few things right off the bat. If you are familiar with Anachrony, you'll notice that they actually have 2 free spots here instead of 3. But once the impact hits, then these 2 will cover up, and I still have 2 free spots. So in other factions, you have 3 free spots, but 2 of them cover up, and then you only have 1 free spot. So it's a little bit of a give and take there. Also, I can pay resources instead of just energy cores here for my exosuits. Also, my timeline benefit here, each time I travel through time and push this marker along, actually goes higher than most other people's. And then how I pay for resources is slightly different. But whichever side you choose to play on, you're going to do a few things for the board that are the same. First of all, you want to take your time travel marker and put it at the start, and you want to take your morale tracker and put it wherever the star is. So in my case, it's actually on the B-side board. It's a little further to the right than most people are. Usually it's in the middle. But so you put those 2 things down, and that's really all you do for now. You also want to make sure you have 3 anomaly markers somewhere. I just parked them there. Then you want to pick either the A side or B side of your leaderboard here, and the A and B side of all of the boards are all different. So there is no play on the A side for the first playthrough. It really just depends on what your evacuation condition is, which is listed here. So you can see that in order to evacuate after the impact has happened and get the bonus VP for evacuating your people, me personally, have to have 2 anomalies, which is odd because normally you don't want anomalies, but in this game I'm actually going to want anomalies. As long as I have 2, when I take the evacuate action, I'm going to gain 4 bonus VP. On top of that, for every 2 spots I have moved along this track, plus 2 green resources that I have claimed, I will gain an additional 5 VP, up to 30. The most you can combine out of this effort is 30 points. But if I have, say, moved 2, 4, 6, 8, so if I moved all the way to the end here, and then have 8 cubes, then I will have done that 4 times. That's 20 plus 4, 24 points, which is a big chunk just for having evacuated. So again, you could pick the other side. This just happens to be the side I chose. You also have your leader card here. There are 3 separate leaders, well, no, 2 for each faction. If you have the Fractures of Time expansion, you get a 3rd one. And each one of them has a special power. You can see for my person here, during the 5th game phase, which you can see this 5 with a little marker here matches up with 5. So during the action rounds, I can take a free action. That's why the circle's there. I just place one of my markers there, and I can either gain 2 water to add an anomaly, or add a paradox to end up with an anomaly, or I can lose 2 water to take 1 away. So he can mess with this track up here as a free action. But before we put his thing down, the last thing we need to do in setting up our player boards is look to here, and you can see this is where we get our starting resources from. So this is actually different from every other board. You can see I gained 4 water, 2 black, 2 yellow, 1 purple, 3 energy cores. I gained 1 administrator who's resting, and 3 scientists and 1 engineer. Once I have accumulated these starting resources, then I can place my faction leader up there. So Shepherd Karaticus. And I've got all my stuff down here ready to go. So that now I am essentially ready to go. Now if I was playing multiplayer, everyone else would have done the same thing and we'd all be ready to go. But we're playing against the solo AI today, so we need to get them set up as well. When you're playing against the Chronobot, the purple side, it's much easier setup than the Chronosaurus, or Chronosis, or however you pronounce his name. So he doesn't start with any resources. He doesn't deal in water ever, or energy cores, so you don't need to worry about that. But he also doesn't start with any resources. The only thing you really need to do is go ahead and give him all 6 of his mechs. So these are his mechs. And technically I have cubes like this, or hexagons, hexagons like this as well. But he always gets to start with 6. I'm going to have to power mine up, and I am actually using the exosuit miniatures from the expansion. Even though they're the purple ones, I realize they're not the right color, but I don't care. They still work, they still function, and they give the board some depth. All right, so you're going to want to give him his 6 exosuits. You're going to want to give him 3 paradox tokens. For me, if you watched my storage video, you'll know that I basically went ahead and gave 3 of these to every faction and then had 1 left over, but they have these blank ones here, so these are his 3 paradox tokens. And then you're going to take these number tokens, which come in the expansion, and you're going to place them where you see the number. And we'll talk about how these move around during the how to play section coming up next. The last thing you're going to do is take all of these generic warp tiles here for them, because they will still claim spots on the timeline with warp tiles, which means they can still earn paradoxes and still earn anomalies, but they don't actually gain anything from it. When I put a warp tile down, I'm actually going to gain resources from the future. They, however, do not. They just put stuff down and it messes with them. And that's why theirs all look the same, whereas mine, you can see, have various things on them. So this would get me an administrator from the future, a scientist from the future, a yellow resource from the future. So that's pretty much it. Like we already noted, they have already claimed the first player banner up there, and we are ready to go. One last thing I realized that I did not cover is some of the stuff scattered around the edge of the board. You do want to get out all your mining resource cards. They look like this. Shuffle them up and place them face down. You do want to take all of your recruit cards, which looks like this. Shuffle them up, place them face down. You want to have a pile of, your workers, your resources, your water tokens, VP tokens, all of that stuff. You also want to go ahead and divide up each of your building types, shuffle them up, and you can place them technically in a face-up stack, because you're going to be able to see what's on top. And that's it. The anomalies you technically don't have to shuffle because they all are exactly the same, as long as you're playing with the standard rules. That's it. And the last thing, if you are playing with the expansion, you got this unique 6-sided die, which actually does not have a 1 or a 6 on it. It has 2 3s and 2 4s. So this is how we're going to decide how the AI does their thing. All right. So we are all set up. We are ready to go. Let's talk about how to play. So the first thing you are always going to do is go through the preparation phase. So we need to, that's essentially seeding the board with the resources and the workers we can claim, also the building tiles. So like we just pointed out, your buildings are always sitting in a face-up pile, but you're always going to take, during the preparation phase, the top one and move it over. Technically the rule book says to move it to the right, but for me it's easier to see, so I don't have to, these higher ones I don't have to look over the higher stack, so I move them this way. But what this now gives you is 2 options for each stack. However, if I say, if someone purchases this or builds this, constructs this building, then one underneath is now available. If someone constructs this building, there's nothing underneath until the next round when you move a building over here. But if I start piling buildings over here because nobody's purchasing them, if I purchase or construct the top one, then the one underneath becomes available. So that will make more sense once we actually get into the game. But so we've seeded our buildings. Then we're going to take one of these mine cards and we're going to flip it over. I place it right there, and we will seed these spots right here with the colors that we see on the card. Boom, boom, boom. Now all of these colors have fancy names, but I don't bother to learn them because there's no need to. All right, then we're going to go over here and we need to decide what workers are going to be available this turn. So we take one of these cards, and just like we did over here, we're going to put down, well, 0 scientists, 2 engineers, 1 administrator, and 1 genius. And we'll just put that card right there so we can remember. And anytime you have multiples of a certain worker type, you just can stack them up on top of each other. All right, so these are the available workers that we can hire or recruit during this era. There are no scientists available to recruit. Also, there is no, well, technically there is one yellow and one black, but other than that, they're very hot commodity right now, very rare resource. All right, the last thing we get to do during preparation is reveal the super project in the next era. So this is very important. You actually get to see ahead as to what's coming, which helps you plan, prepare yourself, but everyone else gets to see it too. So now we know that we can construct this super project in this era, but then the next era, we can produce the dark matter converter. So I may want to think ahead and try and get that stuff prepared now, so I'm ready to go at the beginning of the next era. But right now, we can construct this one. We haven't made it there yet, but it's like somebody has put the blueprints out there and you could steal them, I guess. I don't know. All right, so that is everything for the preparation phase. Essentially, you've seeded the board and gotten it ready for the round. The next phase is the paradox phase. Now, this one's a little tough to explain at the beginning of the game because there is nothing to do at the beginning of the game. This is something that's going to take place from round 2 on, and essentially makes you go through and look back to see who has placed warp tiles, who has received goods from the future, and if they have, they are messing with time, and so they have the chance to roll for paradoxes, which could lead to anomalies. Again, that's something that's better explained during gameplay, but just so you have a very quick understanding, whoever has the most warp tiles, or if players are tied, they both roll this paradox die. If you hit a 1, you simply take 1 paradox and put it right here. If you, however, hit a 2, you would take 2 tiles and put it right here. Now, say we're further along in the game, you always start from the very left and go through all the eras when you're doing the paradox phase. So if you just leave 2 warp tiles sitting on this tile the whole game and everyone else has cleared all those off, you are going to continue to roll the paradox die for this tile every era during the second phase. So, not good to leave that stuff out. But remember, we actually won at least 2. Anytime you place your third thing here, you can stop rolling the paradox die for that era. You will gain an anomaly, and it's going to cover up one of your building spaces. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, but that's what happens in that phase. So, you're basically looking into the past. Have you corrected the timeline or not? If you haven't, you roll for paradoxes, could give you an anomaly. All right, phase 3 is the power-up phase. This is where you will decide how many exosuits you are going to have access to during this era. And for the most part, that's usually all you're going to be able to get. Now, there are a few exceptions of places you can go to get exosuits mid-round, but they're rare. So for the most part, what you as a human player are going to do is first take your 2 free ones. So you can see these have no cost underneath them. So I can place my 2 mech suits here. I know I have at least 2. From here on out, I need to pay the cost underneath to take any more mech suits with me. So do I want to pay any one of the standard resources? That's not including purple. Or do I want to pay an energy core? In this instance, let's say I will pay, what do we want to get out? All right, I'm definitely gonna want to get lots of stuff in here. So I'm gonna need grays, purples, and water. So let's give up a yellow. So what that means is that I can place a guy here, and I can place a guy here. And I have spent these in order to place those out. So I've powered up 4 exosuits. Your exosuits allow you to go to these worker placement spaces. And especially at the beginning of the game, they're the only ones available. Until you have constructed buildings within your safe haven of your city, you have no place to send your workers without an exosuit. Remember, this is like post-apocalyptic future here. It's not safe to go out into the atmosphere. It's not breathable air, so you have to take an exosuit. But once you start building buildings, you'll have places for your workers to go that you can send them to without an exosuit. For example, on your board right here, here's one. Boom, you could send a worker here, and this is where you go to spend water to wake up your workers. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But for now, we're just worried about powering up exosuits. How many exosuits do we want to have available to us for this whole era? Remember, the AI always gets 6, at least for now. All right, so I've decided I paid for 4. Any exosuit that you do not, any of these slots that you do not fill gives you water. So I actually didn't fill 2 slots, so I'm going to gain 2 more water. I'm not really sure the rationale behind that thematically, but it is what it is. All right, so I've decided I'm going to try and attempt to do 4 worker placement activities out here in the next era. All right, 4 is the warp tile. So this is where we need to decide what assistance do we want to request from the future. How do we want to manipulate the timeline? And that's where these, like I said, triangular tokens come into play. And when you're playing against the solo AI, you always need to make this decision first. Normally you go around in player order. In this instance, you always need to decide so that it would be kind of cheating if you knew how many the solo AI was going to do. Because remember, whoever has the most of these on an individual era timeline has to roll the paradox die. So if you were to say, oh, I'm always going to force the solo AI to have more, then that would be unfair advantage. So let us think about what we want to do here. I definitely want to get one of the power plants, because that allows you to time travel, and my whole strategy is going to be around time traveling. But I also want to make sure that I have plenty of my workers available to me, and I want to stay up here and be pushing up here because I'm already up here. So like this building looks mighty nice. So usually I try and stick with the strategy of only picking one thing and hope that the AI might throw down 2. If not 1, then we're just both kind of fighting for it. But in this case, I need to do a lot of time traveling. And in order to advance this marker, I actually need to time travel and give stuff back, or drop stuff off back in the past in order to advance this. So that means I have to put out warp tiles now, risking getting anomalies. I know that, but I need 2. But I'm going to actually put 2 out now. So I've got what I need to build my first building here. If I am able to use engineers, I can build pretty cheaply, and I technically have enough to build right here and here because of the discount they give me. But so I think what I'm going to go ahead and do is request an engineer from the future, and maybe, yeah, that one's not bad either. Okay, I am also going to request some gray resources here. So we'll put those 2 there. And remember, it doesn't really matter where they go. We're just counting to see who has the most. So what this means is that I am going to have to give up a water, but I get to gain a engineer, and I get to gain a gray resource. So all of that came from the future. That is the thematic explanation for how we got that. And we're going to have to return it when we are in the future. We're actually going to have to make good on our delivery. Otherwise, we'll create this space-time continuum paradox, and we'll get penalized for it. So we have requested it. It's been delivered. Now, at some point in the future, we're going to have to actually go back and deliver it. But how do we do the solo AI for this? Well, it's pretty easy. they simply roll this die, because the most you can ever put out is 2. You can put out 0 to 2 warp tiles to claim. You can't put out 5 and 6 and all that jazz. So we're going to take this one where you can see there is actually 2. We'll give it a roll, and you can see it came up with 1, which is the most common. There is a blank though. So they just simply are going to claim 1. So we take their generic token because it doesn't matter, and they just put down 1. So in this instance, during the next era, during the paradox phase, I will have to roll the paradox die. The AI will not. But after that, if I'm able to go back in time, do a time travel, return something, remove one of my warp tiles, then we'll both have to. Or if I can go back and remove both of them, then he'll have to be the only one to roll. Alright, but we have now done our warp phase. Most of the time this moves pretty quickly when you're not explaining it all. Because the last, or not the last, I'm sorry, the 5th phase, the last phase is the cleanup phase. The 5th phase is the action round. This is where all the magic happens. This is the worker placement portion of the game, the Euroness of the game. This is what everybody came for. So, how do you go about taking your actions? Well, when it is your turn, you may either decide to take an exosuit out. By doing so, you need to decide which worker you're going to place into the exosuit, and you're going to drop them in there like that. You can see that their symbol sticks up out the top, so you can be reminded. So you already powered all these up. These are already available to you. You simply, on your turn, choose who you want to put in it, and then place them onto any open spot up here on the board. Now, let's talk about what these spots do. These first 2 spots over here on the far left are always open. Any number of exosuits can be placed here. The top one is your water recycler. By placing an exosuit there, or worker in an exosuit, you get 3 water. If you happen to send a scientist, you get +1 water. But this is also telling you that anybody can be sent there. Here is trade with the nomads. Any number of exosuits can go there. And if you go there, you can simply do any one of these trades. So you could trade 2 common resources for 3 water, or 2 common resources for 1 ultratanium, 1 ultratanium for 1 energy core. 1 energy core can become 3 water, or 3 water can become. You have to follow the circle. So you cannot like jump across like this. I cannot spend 3 water and get 1 ultratanium. Anybody can be sent to trade with the nomads. However, if you send the administrator, you can actually take 2 actions. So you could say 2 resources for 3 water, and then you could take that 3 water and turn it into 1 energy core. So you could go across. Or you could say, I'm going to take 3 water and turn it into 2 resources. I'm going to take 1 energy core and turn it into 1 ultratanium, and then you have what you need to build. Anyways, these 2 over here are always open to any number of exosuits. All right. Then we have the 3 kind of main actions. This is research, this is recruit, and this is construct. The only worker that you can send here is the scientist. You can see the other 2 have a big red X through them. So if you send an exosuit here, what you get to do is you get to gain one of those either triangle, circle, or square cardboard pieces with the various symbols on them. And you have 2 dice here. Now these are the only dice. This is the only luck part of this Euro. But you don't even have to roll both of them. One of them you get to set to a side of your choice. So say you want a square. I want a square, but I don't really care what the symbol is. So I set one to the square, then you have to roll the other one. And this actually means I get to choose the symbol. But let's just say we rolled that computer chip symbol. So I pick out a square with a computer chip on it. Now, say for example, you want, let's look over here. Let's look for the DNA symbol. All right. So say you are trying to get the square DNA. So you could say, all right, I want a DNA symbol. There's 2 of each symbol over here, so I'm going to risk it and try and get a square. Oh, look at that, I did it. So I was actually able to get a breakthrough, exactly what I needed to build my dark matter converter. So remember, anytime you research, you place one on the side of your choice and roll the other one. Here is the recruit action. You cannot send a scientist to recruit. They're too good for that. If you send an engineer, they can not recruit geniuses. They're too dumb for that. Administrators are the best people to send to recruit. If you recruit someone, you simply place your exosuit here. You get to claim any person that's here. You don't have to pay anything, but if there's no tokens here, you can't claim that worker. So there's no scientists to recruit this era. And whenever you recruit someone, you gain the little bonus next to their symbol there. So if I recruit an engineer, I actually get an energy core. If I recruit an administrator, I get 1 VP. Now this is a great time to talk about geniuses. They're the ones with the big brain symbol, the pink ones. Geniuses are wild workers. So essentially they can be used as any other type of worker. So if you have a pink worker and you send them here, that's fine. They can research. They can act as a scientist. They're a genius. The only thing they cannot do is serve as payment for specific things. And I don't see any out right now, but you will see, like, for example, super projects you will have to spend like a scientist. You have to lose a scientist because there'll be a black hole underneath them. You will have to lose a scientist in order to build that super project. You cannot spend a genius for a scientist, but you can send a genius out to act as any person, any type of worker on any worker placement spot, and they gain all the benefits. So when you recruit a genius, you could pick whatever bonus you want. Then we have our construct action. So you're either going to choose a building, a single tile here, or a super project, as long as it's in the era that we're in. And what you do for buildings here, individual small buildings, is you pay the cost that you're covering up. And you always have to start from the left and build to the right. And obviously these all are color-coded, symbol-coded, and you fill them over here. So the most you can have of any building type is 3. If you decide to build a super project, you don't worry about what's on here. You pay what's on the super project, and then the super project is actually laid down and covers up 2 spaces. So fills up your city much more faster. All right. If you cannot send an administrator, they don't like getting their hands dirty. If you send an engineer, that makes the most sense. They actually get a discount of 1 gray cube when they build. Or you can send a scientist, or you can send a genius. But if you send a genius, obviously you would want to say they're going to be an engineer today and get the 1 cube discount. All right, last spot over here is the mine the resources. You send an exosuit over here, and depending on which one of these you go to, you get the resource that is immediately adjacent to the right, and you get to pick any one resource that is over here on the left. So if I went here, I would get a black, and then I could get a green or a purple. If I went here, I could get 2 greens. If someone has gone here already and taken the green, then your only choice is to say get yellow and green, or black and green if you needed a green. You can send anybody there. If you send the engineer, they will come back active. So let's talk about that real quick. During the cleanup phase, when you retrieve your workers, they come back exhausted, they come back tired, and they come back onto this side of your board way over here with the sleepy symbol here. You can see that, the sleepy symbol, and they have to be motivated to get moving again, to get working again, which means they have to be moved from this side over to here. And you either do that by forcing them, which means you lose morale every time you do that, or you can give them water, because water is a precious resource in post-apocalyptic Earth. And if you pay the necessary water, you can move them over here, but you also have to spend a worker, like we talked about earlier. But anytime you see this little symbol here with the eyeball, with the arrow, that means that if you have used that type of worker, they come back active. They don't need to rest. They are excited about their work. That's what they love doing. And so they come back ready to go. You can also see that anytime you recruit a worker, they come in active. They do not come in tired. Last but not least, you have your two kind of city council spots. These act as like wild card spots that if one of these, any of these columns are already full, you could go up here and this can count as any one of these. Now, you'll notice up here, there's a 2 water and a 1 water cost, as well as down here on the bottoms of these 3. If someone's already gone to the top one and you want to go to the bottom one, you have to pay 1 water. Remember the black hole symbol. Same thing for up here. Now the trick with this one, and I guess technically you could go to that one first and just choose whichever action you want to do, but if you happen to go here to do this action, pay 2 water to do one of these actions, you also get to claim the first player token. That's the only way first player is going to change, is if you use this particular city council spot, the most expensive water-wise one, but it allows you to do your choice of these 3 actions: research, recruit, or construct. Really, people usually only go up there once these are full. So that is everything on the main board. Again, that's the only place where you're going to be competing for worker placement spots, and you have to use an exosuit to go up there because that's out in the open. That is where atmosphere is not safe. So yeah. Once you are back on your or anytime really, you don't have to send all your exosuits out first, but remember you have probably more workers over here than you have exosuits, so you can use workers outside of exosuits to go onto your buildings to do actions. For example, if I have constructed this building here, I have to spend a scientist, I have to use a scientist, and I have to spend 1 ultratanium, get rid of it, black hole. But if I do that, I place my scientist here, and this symbol with the 3, looks like these, means I can travel back in time 3 spaces. So that's how we get rid of these warp tiles. I have to have moved up into time, and then I could actually make it as far up as here if I have this power plant built and go 1, 2, 3 back in time. Now I would have to have a gray resource to give back. I can't just go back and give them nothing. But if I do that, I remove the warp tile, I move up on the time travel marker, but this is what a worker placement space looks like. It's the same shape as your worker. And so once you start building buildings, you'll see more of these spots pop up. Some of them are pretty cheap, some of them have cost, so on and so forth. Plus there's always this one, which allows you to refresh your workers and get them ready for the day. Anytime you see these circular spots like here, which is force your workers back and you lose morale, or for my faction leader right here, you simply take one of your tokens and place it on the circle. That just means you can only do them once per round, and you're going to get all those back at the end of the round anyways. All right, so that's how you as a human player takes your turn. You basically continue taking turns, as many as you want or can, until you can't or choose not to, and then you pass. In a multiplayer game, once everybody is passed, you move on to the cleanup phase. But we're here to talk about the solo AI. How does the solo AI function? Well, when it's the solo AI's turn, you do one simple thing. You roll this unique 6-sided die. All right, we rolled a 4. So what does that mean? We look at the 4 token. We do what is right, it's parked next to. In this case, we're going to construct a power plant. It's going to look up at the power plants. It's going to go after the highest VP one. It doesn't really care what's on it except for the VP. And in this case, where it's a tie, it chooses the one that's in the adjacent stack, the small stack. And so it would pick that one up, it would add it to his board, and it's now your turn. Very simple. But you also need to advance this, which means the next turn, or the next time it rolls a 4, it's going to recruit. So as you roll this die, you will notice these arrows. The 3 is going to go boom, 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 and then cycle back around to here. Whereas these guys are going to continue to go around this loop. And the 3 and the 4 are going to be rolled more often than the 2 and the 5. This arrow here is for increased difficulty if you want to play a more difficult game, because this means the AI does nothing. It kind of has a dud round. If you wanted to make things more difficult, you would go straight from there to there. But we're going to play on normal difficulty. All right. So the 4s here is just to show you where these tokens start. Once they get moving, they're just going to rotate in here. This is one of the biggest differences between this Chronobot and the original Chronobot. The original Chronobot used a normal 6-sided die and had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tokens. Like the 6th token just bounced back and forth between 2 things. And the 2 sat off and did nothing for like 2 rounds until it got pushed into the main circle, and the 3 and the 4, I think, I don't really remember, but so this setup is looks different, but it functions the same as the original Chronobot. And that's really it. That is what you do. Now, there's a great explanation of what each of these symbols means, but just briefly, let's look at, most of them are pretty self-explanatory. These are construct, and it's construct a specific building type. This one is super project, but it's got to have a breakthrough, which it's earned through research in order to build the super project. So it can't just build one early without having done nothing. This one is travel back in time and remove a warp tile. It doesn't actually move its token. It just magically goes back, removes it, and advances on its, stick one of these right here, advances on its time travel track here. This one is remove an anomaly. So if it's gain an anomaly, it needs to pay resources, which it'll have stored right here, and it gets to remove the anomaly. Here is mine for resources, and this one is recruit, and this one is recruit a genius. If a genius is not available, then it does research. This one is do research, and I think I covered it, and this one does nothing. Now, when it does research, it only cares about the shapes. So you don't even have to roll the symbol die. Just roll the shape die and give it any symbol of that shape. If you are recruiting, what it wants to do is fill up this column here, because when it does, it can put 1 of each back and gain 5 VP. So it always goes after geniuses first, then administrators, then engineers, and then scientists. Now, if it already has a genius, it'll try and get an administrator. However, if, say, the administrator is not available and it already has a genius, then it'll go after an engineer. So you always look from top to bottom to see which one you can fill. If you cannot fill one, at any point, if you cannot complete an action because you've either taken on 3 buildings already, or there's not an available resource to grab, or there's not an available worker to recruit, whatever it may be, you still put out your exosuit, the AI exosuit, and it takes 1 VP. Similar thing for the resources here. It always wants a purple one, but if it already has a purple one, it's going to focus on these colors, because remember, it wants to kind of complete the rainbow first. Once it completes the rainbow, then it's going to put 1 of each back and gain 5 VP. So that's kind of its focus. When it's buildings and super projects, it's always the highest VP. When it's resources and workers, it's trying to complete the set here, starting with the one at the top, focusing on the one on the bottom last. That's pretty much it. Like I said, it does not deal in water. It does not deal in energy cores. It will gain a lot of the VP tokens throughout the game. That's its main source of scoring. And then it's basically going to, and also it's going to accumulate a lot of buildings. It's going to do a lot of building. But the AI turns, once you get used to them and understand what these symbols mean, go by very fast. The AI turn, remember, it always starts as the first player. So anytime you pass, the round is done. When you're playing solo, when you decide to pass, the round is done. The AI does not get another turn. There are some additional rules that we may talk about in the playthrough if that situation comes up. You can read about them in the rulebook, but just know for the most part that you keep going back and forth. You take a turn, you roll the die, do the AI thing. You take a turn, AI, you pass, done. You keep going about this back and forth until you have passed, and then you do the cleanup phase. Cleanup phase is pretty self-explanatory. You bring back all of your workers first. This is usually important because you want to be able to see, all right, I pulled out an engineer out of this exosuit so he can come back active, whereas everybody else essentially is going to come back exhausted. But then you bring your exosuits back. You do not put them right here because remember, you have to power them up in phase 3. You put them off to the side. You've retrieved all your workers. You can retrieve the exosuits for the AI as well. You're going to clear off this here. You're going to clear off all the remaining workers. And then you're going to do things like check for impact. You're going to check to see if endgame conditions have been met. And if not, then you're going to push on to the next era and go back to the prep phase. Remember, the prep phase is where you flip over a new card. You'll refill this. You'll fill up these empty slots. You'll refill your workers. You'll flip over the next super project. You do all that stuff during the prep phase. So that is how you play Anachrony using the Fractures of Time Chronobot solo AI. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section below. In the next video, we will continue what we have started here. I'm not going to change anything up from what you see. We will actually play through this entire game using what we have set up so far. So if you want to see how this all comes to fruition, please consider subscribing to the channel and keep an eye out, hit that bell icon so you can be notified when my next video, which will be the playthrough, drops on YouTube. Once again, thanks for watching. Have a great day.